Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our board meeting of January the 24th. I am going to call this meeting to order, and board members, I need an approval of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Crosby. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. And next on the agenda is we have our welcome and moment of reflection. Ms. Crosby.
Okay. What I had written up is still on my desk at home. So I'd like to share a quote with you from Dr. Martin Luther King. It says, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think, and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the gold of true education." Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Crosby. Next on the agenda is our school highlights. Ms. Jennifer Passmore.
Good evening, Chairman Hughes, Board of Trustees, and Mr. Pye. During the month of January, all Dorchester District 2 schools joined with schools across the nation to celebrate School Board Appreciation Month. The theme for this year's observance is Celebrating Local Leaders, which highlights the fact that school board members are elected by the people in their local communities to serve children through the grassroots governance of our schools. In what has been another historical year of challenges for school districts, we appreciate more than ever the leadership of our school board in serving the children of our community. Governor Henry McMaster has issued a proclamation in appreciation for the public service of school boards across our state, which highlights the importance of public education. He said, "Education is the foundation upon which the economic, intellectual, and social capital of our state is built." In what has become a school district tradition begun 18 years ago, all of our schools are dedicating a book in their media center in honor of the 7 members of the Board of Trustees that will touch the lives of our students for generations to come. A special dedication book plate will be placed in the front of each book honoring board members. Those books are on display here. Thank you to the Dorchester School District 2 Board of Trustees, Barbara Crosby, Justin Farnsworth, Evan Guthrie, Gail Hughes, Brian Mitchum, Tanya Robinson, and Ashley Wimberly for your advocacy, leadership, and your commitment to put the welfare of children first in all decisions that you make. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Passmore. Okay, next on our agenda is we have public comments on agenda items. And we are going to begin that with Ms. Barbie Crosby. Barbie Ross. I'm sorry. I said Barbie. I just said Crosby.
Hey. Well. I said, well. I was like, what did I do?
On behalf of the membership of the Somerville Education Association, we'd like to give you a token of our appreciation. The tokens aren't as good this year because our cookie maker had a baby. So I tasted one and not quite the same, but you know. It's been a difficult year for all of us. And although our membership has not always agreed with some of your decisions, we do appreciate the service that you give to our school district. Yours is a difficult job, and we know that you do not make these decisions lightly. Please know that our membership is more than willing to work with you during these difficult times. We hope to accomplish many things together, such as a return to safe levels of staffing in all our schools, a respectful working relationship between stakeholders to ensure quality education for all. Please feel free to reach out to us and seek input regarding the front lines of what is occurring in our schools. Again, thank you for all that you do for the staff and students in DD2.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. Okay, next up is Jason Brockert.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, DD2 Board, and Mr. Pai. I feel a little remiss following up with that. I do appreciate, as much as I come up here to take you to task, I appreciate everything that you do. I will reposition myself, but I will keep my mask on if that's all right. All right, thank you. I do appreciate everything that the board does. I know that I'm up here to take you to task quite often. I think that is our job as a community, to make sure that we're keeping everything in check the way that we feel it should be. So one of the items that's on the agenda today is safety in general. I've come up here and spoken about that before in the form of mental health and safety. The piece that I'd left off, and I don't know what's on the docket for discussion today, but recently in Dorchester 4, they've installed some new metal detectors. So I would like to see that kind of action as well in our district. We have had 3 different gun incidents in the past year, 2 of them involving actual guns on school property, 1 of them involving a threat. We've had at least 7 different weapons threats or actual weapons on campus so far this year, which is significantly higher than any other year. And obviously, a lot of people are under stress. It's causing different things to happen at home. These things are trickling into the schools. So safety at schools is obviously paramount. In addition to that right now, and what was just said is that the levels of staffing currently in the schools are not necessarily, and I don't know because I haven't been able to see the numbers, they haven't been updated for over a week now, they're not adequate for the amount of students that we have in the schools. I've spoken with several parents that have said that they've had their children in classes that have had no teacher. Now, these are typically in high school settings where it's a specific period and not an entire day worth of instruction. But if we don't have the staff in the building to monitor the students, I remember what it was like to be in high school. I can imagine what would happen in some of my high school classes if we knew there was not going to be instructed there the entire period. And I'm sure that most of you can too. So obviously, having the staff support physically in the building is very important. So if the school can't be supported for safe operations, and I would expect that's what's led to the recent 5 schools going virtual, 9 different classes going virtual. But again, that information coming out to the district as clearly as possible, as transparently as possible, is key in trust. So if we see that schools are going virtual, but we haven't seen exactly why they're going virtual, other than we're told that they've gone virtual, there's a disconnect there. So again, trust, transparency, please give the district the information. Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have for public comments on agenda items. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes. Board members, in your package, you should have received the regular meeting of January the 10th, 2022, and the call meeting of January 14th, 2022. I need a motion to approve those, please.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Farnsworth. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Next on our agenda is the superintendent's report, the state of the district. Mr. Pai.
Then when you and I met the other day, I didn't really have a whole lot that I needed to say, but it's picked up some steam in the last few days. So let's see if I can make sure I do this in some kind of manner that it's organized and seems to make sense. But I want to first of all provide the board with an update on the current and proposed Dorchester District 2 COVID dashboard. Remember at the last meeting, you tasked us with trying to get something out that might have a little more meaning to them. Of course, we have debated, do we just throw the other numbers out since parents are used to that, and a lot of people have commented they appreciate what we've done with that, and we do gather that data, so do we continue to do that? But we've come up with something that we think is very parent-friendly that will show you how you're this modeling up to the state model, high, low, medium. We have a rubric set to tell you what determines that in the different schools, allowing also for us to look at things that you would not know about and maybe we don't know about. Each principal, when the results are called in from their school for that day, we're going to do things probably a day early. We can't get them out the same day, so we will have that kind of notice. And then if a school is closing our grade level, we're going to try to give an extra day for the parents to try to work with, you know, getting the babysitters and all, because that's a big problem. So with all that said in mind, we're trying to look at all the moving parts. What is the right thing to do to help our staff and our public understand what we're faced with? And there's no silver bullet, folks. If there was one, I'd have every one they made. We can't find one. We go round and round. My staff has been tasked. I'm really showing my age and my feelings towards this whole pandemic is that I don't want to hear any more negativity about what we can't do. What can we do? We have to do something. We have to keep our students safe. We have to keep our parents, our teachers safe and other support people. But we also have to teach school. We have to teach these kids. And the best way is certainly person to person. We have so much coming and going that even then the teachers are doing dual modality, triple modality, you name it, they're doing it. They're having to do it, and kids are coming and going with time starting. It's amazing. There is no way I could teach in today's environment. And I was once a good teacher, but I'm not a whiz with technology to be able to do that. You're spending all day with a machine. Are we really getting to the kids as far as teaching? So I have a concern with that, but we're limited as what our options might be. I do know we've had directions from the State Department of Education, as from the General Assembly. The whole point is to do everything we can to keep school children in school, and they want us to do just what we're doing, which is still very disruptive. Classroom, school, and then, classroom, grade level, then school. And we know that doesn't always fit a neat package and could really hurt some kids. We're also looking at the 5-day, many other districts have moved to that. It's the second 5 days. It's still 10 days. 5 out of school, but 5 in school under certain parameters. That's the part that is really baffling us, is the lack of support staff or any kind of staff to monitor that. Of course, our nurses are just about worn out and I'm speaking for them and without having spoken to them, but I'm getting it third and fourth hand that they're just worn out. And they're trying to do a wonderful job, but they're nurses. Yes, they're supposed to know their numbers of what's happening, so how effective they are and what decisions might need to be made. But we're going to have to make sure this is done a different way, a more efficient way, that we have people in the staff, on our present staff, that perhaps can help get those numbers, freeing the nurse up to work with the actual cases to help identify and send them home and that kind of thing, and be that person in the school. Now, the high schools have 2 nurses, and they have some support helpers there, and the high schools are going the smoothest of all of them. But when you get down to the elementary where there's the one nurse, it's overwhelming. For the parents, the younger the child, special needs children, their parents want to know why, when, where, and they want to get the nurse to tell them. She talks to them one parent by one. She can't continue that because she's not able to do her job. So I would like to see what ways can we move that to administration, other clerical staff, whatever, but we're going to have something better to gather the data. And that's what we've been working on. So in the absence of a dashboard the last couple of days, there's a reason for that. We were very concerned about the numbers coming in and us being able to react that same day and be effective and efficient with a revolving door of we having to factor in how many people's out today, and tomorrow may be critical. The next day may be fine. Friday, we could have closed the district and been worthy of it. Today, based on staff, today the staff that was out on Friday has been reduced more than half. But again, how long will this hold up? Because it keeps rotating in and out the people, and that's our concern. So we're trying to monitor that. So with that all said, for everybody's safety, we have contracted with one of the folks that actually helped to develop Power School. We got his name from Horry County, and he helped do a program that would allow us to extract the data from Power School, which is our main way of getting information. And that maybe we can keep up with this through attendance, through our seating charts could become the new roles in which a substitute, a teacher is reminded, there they are, they call John Jones' name out, and John Jones is there. John, thank you for wearing your mask, because that's the requirement. You move on. But now you get to Susie, and she doesn't have a mask on. Susie, you're not wearing a mask. Would you please come up and get one? We give her that opportunity. And then you got Billy. I'm not wearing any mask. Well, then the office is contacted, and Billy will be sent home, because then he is jeopardizing the other kids who are trying to follow that. If we go to that, you have to have that in place, and that's what we've not been able to assure that we can do fairly and equitably among the school system. Our schools are just so large. We've already compromised by not being able to social distance, especially in the upper grades. We've already compromised by not having a mask mandate, good, bad, or indifferent. We're not having that mitigation like a lot of places might be having. And then we're down to what else is left. So if we could reduce the quarantine, chances are we could reduce the coming and going to some degree. But we've got to have a measure of safety. It's just not getting lower numbers. The numbers are going through the roof if we have nothing. You just come back and there's no system in place. But we don't have the staff to have what we call the mass patrol. So that's what I'm being told. And I talked with the principals at length about it today. I have an all-day principal meeting tomorrow. We are hopefully going to wrap some things up, but I've asked Thad Smink, who's in charge, he's our data person here in the district, and sharp as a tack, he's been working with Ms. Santa Maria to develop a new format, which we were developing before we got the man's name. He's come up with his thing. We want to get this out as what we want it to be. Then we're going to use his numbers, and the rest of the week we hope to have his numbers that we can start plugging in to see what, if any, results this will be before we announce what are we going to do. Continue with 10 days, go to the 5 days, but these are the things I think we need to have a plan, and it can't just be we feel good, we're going to do that today. I'd like to be able to say in a test run, we're feeling this is just as good if it is now. So why would you go 10 days if you have a system that's not functioning the way you want it to be? But then we don't want to go to a system that's even less functioning, causing great harm to our staff and our students. These are just issues that I'm making it sound so simple, but it's not that simple. And I'm giving you a synopsis of what has taken literally 3 full school days with up to 15 people sitting there all day. We're trying to work through this and look at the numbers of all of our schools, talking to principals. It's a never-ending job. So Thad, if you'll then tell us more about the COVID tracker dashboard and anything else that I left out, and then we'll go on with the program.
Sure, excellent. Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Pai, thank you for having me this evening. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to reveal the dashboard that Mr. Pai is alluding to, but I think it might be prudent for all stakeholders to sort of hear.
Thad, talking to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go. You're too tall for that mic.
Too tall. There we go.
Yeah, that's better.
So at the end, I'm going to reveal our proposal. But in the meantime, I just want to take a moment to kind of walk everybody through the process that we used, as well as many of the factors that were considered in developing this new dashboard, just with the hope that everybody will understand why we landed where we did. And I want to preface all of this by saying that a lot of thought and energy went into it because, as you've heard me say before, data is powerful, but data can be interpreted and misinterpreted. And we try to be the best shepherds of that data as possible, while still maintaining competence and transparency, but we also don't want it to turn into something that can be used in a negative light as well. So with all that being said, we started reviewing the whole process by taking a look at some of the challenges that we face. I'm not going to belabor all of these points too long, but just wanted to make sure that everybody who's watching in, that we have an evolving virus who's affecting our populations differently. We have different research that's telling us to mitigate things differently. When can people come back? When can they not come back? It's a moving target. Our guidelines that are being given to us are constantly changing, also due to the fact that it's a changing virus. Our research is getting better. Our population, the mitigation that we're using as communities are changing. And then, community response. How are things happening geographically? Do the daycares contribute? How can they, if we close down, are they closed when we're open? There's lots of factors that go into play here, and we're trying to make sure that what we provide people is helpful to everyone and all stakeholders. So that was definitely our thought, is how can we do all of that? And then there's some internal factors, the evolving policies and practices. I mean, last year you guys were, as a board, rewriting some of the policies, thinking about masks, not using masks. The big thing here is that people also don't think about, when it comes to policies and practices, just the semantics that can get involved. Like, people often say to me, well, why can't we just ask the schools this? Well, is it quarantined or is it isolation? Is it going to be a 5-day or is it going to be a 10-day? Your staff members, when they're out, how do we know that they're out for, is it COVID related? Is it COVID? Are they COVID positive? All of these things play a major role, and we're trying to collect all of that data, but you have to have the mechanism in place. You have to have the training involved to do all of this. And as we can see, it gets complicated. And of course, we also want to make sure that we have our best practices that are in place, just as our parent was talking about tonight, is apropos, to make sure that we're doing everything that we can related to student safety. How can we have the best choices to keep kids safe? That's kind of my last point there up there, is balancing that individual's needs versus the community. How can we keep the most amount of kids in school, yet carve out that particular class, or quarantine these few kids, or move kids around? It's a daunting task, and it's one that takes a lot of information. And again, that information isn't always particularly clear. The next set of changes that we had are some of the ones that are causing the greatest problems. That when it related to student level data, real-time data. Most of the time in a normal school day, attendance isn't even closed out until the end of the school day, because kids are coming and going all throughout the entire day. So you have the issue of, well, we know what school looked like at 4 o'clock yesterday, so what the data that we're looking at the next morning, that the nurse and I are all frantically trying to get compiled for 8 o'clock in the morning for our huddle to figure out what's going on, the schools are already experiencing a whole new reality. They're getting a whole new set of numbers, a whole new set of teachers calling out for various reasons. And so that real-time data is definitely an issue. The concentration levels. How do we create a system to be able to extrapolate the data in order to be able to understand that, well, while we want grade level data on a particular school, well, is it a classroom? Is it the whole grade level? Is it a geographical side of the school that's going down? We don't really know until we start to ask those deeper questions. And we want the ability here to have a system in place where we can assess that, raise flags, call to that building, ask the principal who's really on the front line, what's really going on here, so that we can work with the principal to make the best decision. But it's creating that structure that allows for that conversation to occur, and occur with good, clean data. Clean data. When you have 24 nurses doing the best that they can at 11:30 at night, still doing contact tracing, they're going to have keystroke errors. And those keystroke errors, you've seen it. If you're a parent following the dashboard, you're probably wondering, why did the year-to-date go down? That's impossible. If you had a case, where did it go? Well, because we discovered that there were 5 keystroke errors because they put ABBES instead of ABES. Okay, so these are things that are all involved, and we want to have a solution, and I think we found one. But we just, again, wanted to make sure we're kind of leveling that playing field with all stakeholders and the knowledge of everything that goes in. We also want to talk a little bit about data as a potential contributor. We don't want to put data out there that gives people false representation of what's occurring. People who are weary need to know the actual things. And I kind of liken it to standing at the beach when you're standing in the waves, right? That's how we feel in the data world right now. You got some big waves coming, and then you got the flowing back out, and every now and then you can see the person standing down shore, but they're kind of bobbing. And how do you put a number on that? At what wave do you count? Do you take an average of the waves? We don't, all of a sudden kind of a rogue wave hits you. Well, you don't want people running scared onto the beach because of one wave when you know that beyond that wave, everything is pretty calm. So there's a lot going on with the data. And I think Mr. Pai alluded to it too perfectly when he said, we know that sometimes numbers are a little high, but we also know that tomorrow 20 kids are coming back out of quarantine. So again, which wave do we report? How do we inform the public? Because it's a massively it's a moving target. And again, regarding the teacher level data, I'm not going to repeat those first few bullets. It's the same thing applies. Real-time data with our teachers, even though our schools are reporting to us in the morning. Again, those concentration levels. We've got 22 people missing from a school. Well, are they, support staff, or are they classroom teachers? At the elementary school, are they your core classroom teachers, or is it a teacher's aide? Are they resource? It's hard to know exactly what all the responsibilities are, because when it comes, like, take a PE teacher, they can have 45 kids. A resource teacher in that particular hour might have 8. So when the PE teacher's out, there's 45 kids you got to take care of. When the resource teacher's out, there's 8 you got to shuffle around. Just as all sorts of different factors. So also the COVID-related versus daily life. When we hear about teacher absences, why are they out? Are they out because of a surgery? Are they out because they're taking care of an elderly parent? These are things that are happening in life that are pulling our staff out, that are tough even in a normal year, let alone. And then again, the challenge is what threshold do you send? Do we say, well, when 15% are out, or is it 10%? And so that's where that school safety and security comes in. 15% of your faculty being out at one school could potentially be absorbed just as well as 10% in another school. It just depends on where those people fall. But how do you do all of that in real time when people are calling in the morning? So, and it's not their fault. Again, when your parent goes to the hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning and you weren't expecting to be out, you're calling in the morning. So there's just a lot of moving pieces and parts. So how do we, understanding all of these challenges, the next part was to consider, okay, so what are the outcomes? What are the things that we want to see? And really, I think it's pretty clear. We want data that accurately depicts reality. That's whatever we all want to define as reality. There's another hard part of it, right? Data allows granular decisions. Well, granular data requires a lot of work and effort, which we honestly realize that in these times of peak performance, that's pushing our nurses and a lot of our support staff to work till 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, because probably cursing my name, because I'm asking for such granular data so that when Mr. Pai says, well, I need to know specifically how many of this, because he's trying to make the smallest adjustment possible to keep the most kids in school, that data is needed. So it's tough. The data allows, though, that informs in a meaningful way. And we want data that provides parents information that consists with planning and childcare. We've heard the board, talk about that. Data that allows school leaders to make decisions based on situations that are unique to their schools, yet trying to be consistent across the district as much as possible. And with the whole goal here of really maximizing in-person attendance is ultimately what we're after. And of course, we want data that allows for the least amount of disruption while maintaining that safe environment for all stakeholders. So where did we land after contemplating all of that? Well, what we're going to show you is going to look a little different than what you see. This is our current dashboard, and our parent is correct. It hasn't been up because we've been trying to. It's hard to find the time to get the dashboard and reconstruct and chase down during the peak. I mean, when hundreds of kids are going out and hundreds of points of data are coming in, but we hope to get everything back up as quickly as possible. We have been, just for everybody at home, we have been communicating with the board our numbers. We want to be as transparent as possible, but we also don't want to put out data that is inconsistent, incorrect, and doesn't reflect reality. So that's the current dashboard, and then the next slide sort of indicates here what we're proposing. So what you see here is it's a little bit, I would say, more user-friendly in spotting trends. I mean, now if you wanted to spot the trend, you'd have to go in there and print off that PDF every day and kind of plot the chart of your kid's school. This is going to help parents be able to see day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, over 5 days. After that, I think it starts to get a little bit too much. And so we would basically start building out to that parents could see that. Now you're going to see here 2 different columns in each day, a staff tracker and a student tracker. Because if you read the DHEC guidelines, which you're all familiar with, there's basically 2 ways that a school could potentially have to close a classroom, a grade, or a school. And that is through some criteria that could be hit based on student absences, and then others based on teacher and staff absences, whether that be a threshold of so many having positive cases, or whether you can no longer maintain or operate within a safe environment of that school. And so we wanted to be able to, if you see off to the lower right, we have our key that kind of shows you, we looked across the state, we looked at a lot of other school districts, what thresholds were they using for staff, and to the far right, you can see the threshold is pretty clearly established by DHEC. And again, coming up with the thresholds for staff is difficult because DHEC isn't specific about it. They have left it rather vague, and then left it up to us as the districts to make that determination. So we, again, all those challenges that we talked about, we took all that into consideration with those outcomes that I just talked about. We looked across the state at what's being used by other districts, and that's how we came up with this 10%. But we also want to make sure we stress here that the staff positive or quarantined for COVID being greater than 10%, just because it's raising the flag doesn't necessarily mean that it'll constitute a school closure, like we talked about before. That's a conversation between Mr. Pai and that building principal to be able to make that determination on the ground of what does that 10% actually look like. This dashboard isn't meant to make the final decision of whether or not a school stays open or closes. It's there really for 2 purposes: to help parents get a little bit better idea of where their school is at or trending, to help them better understand kind of that, like the idea how where is the staff versus where are we with students, and also for parents to be able to plan. Take, for example, if I look at a school and I see that my child's school for the last couple of days has just been straight mediums, staff and faculty, right? I know that probably the next week or so, I'm pretty safe. I'm not going to have to make a lot of other arrangements. Could it be that one particular classroom in that school just explodes and needs to be shut down? Potentially. But we want the tracker to be able to give parents a general idea. I start seeing my school tick up to where the teachers are high and students are low, well, then I kind of know that there is a potential there. And we want them to be able to follow that over time. And we also, as you can see up there, for schools that are closed or could be closed. Of course, we would have the reopening date so that the parent would understand, but obviously, when the school's closed, there's no data to report, so we would pick it back up where they left off when they get back. So I also want to stress, of course, the data that you see up there, just a sampling of what it could look like. This does not reflect our true data. This is just so that you could envision it a little bit more. And also another point I wanted to stress was the idea of ranges. Why did we stay with ranges for each school? Because again, the situation, I think that the word that came up the most in the conversations over the past few days is fluid. You could have a grade level that looks low, 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 and then one day 3 kids walk in who are all positive. They knock out 6 kids each to be quarantined. Now you're 18 plus those 3. Now you're up to 21 kids in a grade level. In a grade level, because that number is smaller, it's more volatile where that measuring stick can go. You can have quick peaks and quick valleys. So to minimize that effect a little bit, that's why we went with the school, because the school average is going to be less susceptible to these peaks and valleys that will give people, as we talked about one of our challenges, we don't want our data to contribute to any undesirable decisions by parents. We want them to get sort of that stable feel for where their school is going. Of course, if I'm a parent and I'm looking at this and I see high and high, I'm probably on a little bit alert that there's a chance that my kid's classroom or my kid's grade level could potentially, have to go to a temporary virtual instruction. But again, our hope is, with all of this effort, is to keep the kids in school safely. So again, we've kind of got that, put up there. And again, whether you would like for this to supplement what we're already giving or supplant what we're already providing, providing both or one or the other is all very feasible. And so we would just leave that up to your decision. And of course, I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about our proposed dashboard.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Farnsworth?
Apologies, and super easy. So the days there, for instance, so today's Monday, would that be from last week potentially? What would that look like?
Yeah, so we would pretty much day 5 would be your most current day, so that you would have 4 previous days' history. We just
You'll go out every day.
yeah. I'm sorry?
We're going out daily.
Yeah, this would go out daily.
So when you
Those
get
would
it,
go out
number
daily.
5 is that day.
Day
with the
5 would be
latest
potentially
data, but you got the
yesterday,
4 days
'cause that's
before
when we
it
have the data
to
from.
show you where it's trending.
Yep.
Exactly. So the school week. So on Friday, you would have an entire week's worth of data. On Monday, the previous Monday would fall off. And of course, with day 1 and all that, we would be using actual dates.
You still have it.
You would
Keep
have
it,
the
and you'd
last
have
5
the whole
days
10 if you
always.
want it.
For this purpose, because it was proposed, we didn't want to send panic, like, oh my gosh, my schools are high. Like, this is all just, again, data there for you to observe tonight. We wanted it to truly be a sample.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Ms. Wimberly?
So just to clarify that, so the low, medium, and high, it's, you're combining the staff or students who are positive plus quarantined. So it's both. It's a combination.
So so DHEC's regulations on students or guidelines on students is that you combine the positive and quarantine for students, and then on the staff side, it's the positive staff and the quarantine as well. That being said, of course, they leave that first bullet point up there about determining for the safety of the school, because even in a normal year with FMLA and surgeries and sicknesses and things that go through, you could already be pretty tight. So having an additional 10% of your staff out could really put you in a situation where you cannot safely function. But again, while we want to have this dashboard to give people an inkling or an idea of where things are, we're leaving those decisions to our directors and our principals who understand what the reality of what's happening on the ground. And again, we know that today might be a particularly tough day, but we know tomorrow staff members are coming back. And so versus, staff members aren't coming back for the next 2 to 3 to 4 days, and 5 days out, we've got something else going on. And so that would always come into play. But the main focus, as we're trying to say, is, and that's what a lot of across the state, that 10% of COVID-related cases in the building is sort of where that threshold is.
Gail, can I?
Yeah.
First of all, I appreciate what you've done and everyone that's worked with you, because this proposed COVID dashboard breaks it down in such an easy way to understand. And I think your direction that you've shared with us tonight has helped probably anybody that's listening, because there are so many moving parts to this. And I think you explained that very well. I just wanted, and maybe everybody already knows this, but what I with the numbers, I know that our head nurse, Ms. Santa Maria, she gets the numbers from the health department, and the principals just, or the nurses at local schools, do they just turn in who was absent with COVID, and do they correlate?
So there's a lot of double checking involved in our department. So the basic process is the school nurses and the school administration will report all cases. They'll report the COVID positive and quarantine. Again, those numbers go in, they come to Ms. Santa Maria overnight, and then there's a lot of data that the nurses and Ms. Santa Maria add to that. When can they return? Are they positive? There's a whole slew of questions that DHEC requires us to ask, and then all that gets put into a spreadsheet. And that's always evolving. Now they have what they call a switch count. So we too have to be able to tell them how many students were quarantined, who then potentially switched with inside of that quarantine window to being positive, versus a student who was quarantined, came out of quarantine, and then became positive, versus a student who was quarantined, and then just quarantined again, and then just quarantined again. So all these things have to be mitigated. And so that data comes to me. My department, we scrub it, and we analyze it, and we look for, we call clean the data. We look for those misspellings and those missed ones and zeros that go into our formula. And then the process begins where we put that into the charts that we provide you. We put that into other charts that I'm providing Mr. Pai. What he gets a report that will show him all sorts of breakdowns by 10%, 15%, 20%, more data than he probably wants to look at. But when he talks to a principal, then he can talk intelligently on how many are quarantined versus how many switch count. All that information is going in there. And then that's why you also will see sometimes our year-to-date, when we find errors, we make the correction. We don't want there to be errors, and we publish it. So far, luckily, our errors have been pretty minimal. They haven't really caused any major swings or anything like that, but it is an overwhelming process. And the last slide where we'll talk to you about is we're hoping to bring on, as Mr. Pai talked about, a better way of getting the information single one-time keystroke entered into PowerSchool, where we can then have less potential for human error. Even though if I have to toot my own department's horn, the error has been pretty small, pretty marginal. Ms. Santa Maria and her nurses do a phenomenal job with the data, and we run it through our pivot tables and stuff to try to clean things up. There's really little for us to clean up. And getting back to your question of how do we double check it, well, that's what makes it, that's what we're talking about as one of those challenges, because we're operating on day old, and then the next day that nurse, that principal, that teacher, they're seeing additional kids out. And they're like, well, we've got 30 kids out now instead of 20. Okay, well, we know about 17, tell us about the other 13. And then sometimes a parent calls in a timely fashion and tells us that so-and-so tested positive, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they wait until 5 o'clock, and rightfully so, because they were trying to do the right thing. They wanted to take their kid down to the local CVS and get them tested to find out what was really going on, and they didn't find out themselves until 5 o'clock, so they're being conscientious and they're emailing us in, and all of a sudden that kid goes from one category into another category. So these are all the types of things that we're up against, and our nurses are constantly having to go in there and update the data and scrub the data and send it to us and compile the data. And we're hoping with this new system, while it will be, again, cumbersome at first, we're hoping that it will give us cleaner, faster, more granular data that we can query, that will hopefully allow our nurses to go to bed at night before midnight, when we can press one button and it will make the phone calls or make the emails and process a lot of the charts that we're doing in the evening, because we can't do it in the evening until the day closes. So we're very hopeful with this. We just actually we're on the phone with a gentleman today, so we're very hopeful that perhaps maybe in the next couple of weeks, I'll be bringing an even greater dashboard in front of you to present. But in the meantime, we're trying to be as responsive as we can to your requests and the stakeholder requests.
Thank you.
You mentioned that DHEC is requiring these switch accounts. I think that was the term you used.
Switch count, yeah.
So are we keeping up with the number or the percentage of students who have been quarantined who then test positive versus the ones who, do we have those numbers?
Yes.
I mean, is that something you could share with us, or do we?
Yes, sure, absolutely. I mean, if that's something you would like to see in in our weekly report, can absolutely make that happen. That is a point of data now.
Yes.
Has been a point of data for the last two months or so. Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be very valuable. And then the other question I have is about the vaccination status. What's the system now for collecting that? Is that done at the district level? Is that done at the school level? How streamlined is that?
I would have to defer that to Ms. Santa Maria, because she definitely will handle that, and more than I would.
And then, I mean, I didn't know if they're talking about Power School, if there's a way to upload data like that onto the Power School system.
Yep, we're working on that with the current exploration of this Power School plugin. Currently, it's a school-based system, so when a student has an exposure, parents can volunteer that information to clear their student from quarantine.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't
No problem. So we are looking at an option to add that to the Power School plugin. Currently, it's a school-based process, so when a student has an exposure, parents can volunteer that information to the school to clear them from quarantine.
So, yeah, because I was just thinking it would help alleviate some of the stress on our nurses and the staff who are trying to collect that, if there was just a central place for parents to upload it. And
yes, we're hopeful that this will take over for that.
okay.
Okay.
I have a question. I need to turn my mic on. First of all, is there a difference in what the schools report in and what Ms. Santa Maria, what your group collects? And if so, why is there a difference?
Nope, it's all one central intake process. So parents report information a variety of ways. We're working on making it one uniform way, but currently parents will either email the school nurse, contact the teacher, or fill out an intake report form. The nurses and the staff at the schools, our UAPs and some other contact tracing staff members that we have, will follow up with those parents, get additional information as needed, provide them with return dates for their students who are isolated or quarantined, and then all of that information feeds to the system that Thad and I work on each day.
Okay, so when you receive data from DHEC, how then is that data used to help you determine your numbers or ensure that the numbers are all collected in the same manner?
So the information that we get from DHEC typically, especially during a surge like this, is really more for confirmatory purposes. It's not providing us with information that we did not already have. They are quite delayed in their reporting at this point. So the emails that we get and the batch reports that we get are typically for cases that we were already aware of for days because they're so far behind.
We definitely have sort of the lead data on the most accurate data that would reflect our school's reality. Just the way it's streamlined, the way our system is set up.
Okay, but is that the purpose, or is that the reason for the delay sometimes because of the fact of when you get the DHEC information in and maybe a delay in
I would say it's
reporting?
typically a delay in reporting. We've seen that there's been a statewide delay in test results coming back. So for example, the last 2 days we received reports from parents of tests that were done last week, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th. So there can be a delay in reporting of that information to us. We act on all information that we receive within 24 hours. So our goal at this point, and why, as Thad mentioned, we have been working, until midnight, 2 in the morning, is to make sure that our numbers for the next day are an accurate depiction of what our schools looked like the day before and what they look like going into our decisions for that day. So we notify parents within 24 hours of being made aware of a case if their child is needing to quarantine, and we reflect that information in our data the next day.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, I just want to thank you for saying that, because some of the emails we get, they go, why didn't we get this before now? You can't tell the parent until they tell you what the test is. And some of them are being delayed. That's refreshing. I mean, it's not refreshing, but it's good to hear.
And parents are delayed. They don't always get the result back quickly. So, and if they're delayed, then we get delayed. But again, Ms. Santa Maria sent me a spreadsheet at 1:30 this morning, and I got up at 6:30 to start processing it to have it ready to go. So we feel like that's a pretty good turnaround on when we start our day. We know it's day old, but that's about as close as we're going to get it to real time until those kids start hitting our doors.
Well, just so you know, that's the reason why I'm asking, because I want the people out there to hear this. So that's the reason why I'm asking these questions. I'm not saying that y'all are sitting on information or whatever. I just want everybody out there to hear what steps are being taken. So that's the reason for my questions. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Ms. Wimber?
I have one other question for Ms. Santa Maria. So the contact tracing, that process, are there guidelines that you have to follow from DHEC for that, or how does that work?
They tell us that we have to do it, and then they provide us with the parameters of what a close contact means, what that definition looks like specifically for schools. Close contact to a staff member is always 6 feet regardless of mask use. It can be reduced to 3 feet if one or both parties is masked. So things like that are what we look at. Our nurses do a very good job of not only reviewing seating charts, but talking to teachers and finding out other classroom information, because obviously our goal is to keep as many students in school as possible. So we don't want to just look at a piece of paper and send students out, but unfortunately it's not an ideal process. It involves speaking to teachers, reviewing seating charts, talking about classroom activities, those types of things.
But so it is, the guidelines, they do come from DHEC that you're following?
For what the definition of a close contact is, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, thank y'all.
Thank both of you. Thank you very much, and we'll keep the board abreast as quick as we're making, not only the data they share with you, but we as a group are trying to do with the new information that we have received. We like what we're feeling real good about the spreadsheet stuff that we've come up with the ranges. We feel that's the fairest way to keep it going, and therefore we're not down to a finite number. It's 30, it's 29, and 30, it's kind of the number we're looking at. You have 29.9. Everybody's going to call and say, well, it's 29.9. Why don't you go ahead and do it? Well, that's today. Tomorrow it could be 22. So we're having to watch that and watch that pattern. The whole point is to watch the pattern. There's still no guarantee because of what we're dealing with here and the rapid turnaround. So we're doing an awful lot of work because it's been required, it's been asked of us, and we're doing it in the name of safety, but it's really taxed us because people are making rules and regulations that's just not practical sometimes for a normal staff of educators and support staff not trained in all this to have to do that. But our team has stepped up. I mean, that's department, Ms. Patrick's back there, and I was complimenting her today. She spoke to the interns earlier this week, or was it this week? And my wife came home telling me that she said, do you have any idea how talented these people are? I hear from your directors and all that. We all know they're wonderful. But you've got some unsung heroes in this building that are running the program in so many ways, and they're assuring us of the accurate information. And I know she was such a great instrumental person helping us with the dashboard when we first, the dashboard that we got when we were doing the various programs, the warehouse program that we had for the data, Enrich. We've had lots of things that we've had to learn and do, and Lisa's been in the forefront statewide in doing that and making it connect back with our staff members in the schools, and I so appreciate her, but I can't tell you how hard this staff works to make things work and do, and they get a lot of pressure from me. I don't mean to put it on there because I don't want faulty information, but I want as timely as we can be. We're dealing with some grave subjects, and I don't want to make haphazard decisions. I want to make them based on the best information I can get. So thank you all for the great job you did in tonight also. All right, and we'll deal with, I've got word that our visitor, our person that's the consultant helping us, will be present tomorrow for the portion of the principals meeting. We can introduce them and they can explain what they've done and allow our principals to help us to dissect about how that could be beneficial to us. If not, what are the flaws, and let's tell him, get busy, figure out a way to make those flaws go away. So thank you. Now the next area that I want to move to is that we've talked about all of our employees are working day and night, every group, and we can single out any group, but I hate to do that because there's so many people just doing their job, whether they're told to do it or not, and way beyond, going what we call the extra mile. Funding is a challenge for our district. The COVID monies that we received were to be spent on COVID-related items, not payroll. It is not meant to be for personnel payroll. It is permissible to do incentives, stipends, and those kind of things. And we've talked in the past about certain groups. One of them is the sub situation. So first of all, I took a look at the sub situation. We have over 300 who have withdrawn this year their name, and they're asked not to be considered a call. So that's quite a hit from us from that original number of 600 down to 200 and something, and it's dropping faster. So I want to know how much of it's related to salary versus just COVID in general, because I know I've talked to people with both of those as the top issues. Well, we sent out a survey that you can only do one time. It's controlled. Out of the 300 and something we sent out, 273 people were given the survey. 27% had responded. That's pretty normal for surveys of any kind. If people, especially a group that's, I'm out of here, I'm finished, I'm not coming back. It was like a closing thing when someone leaves the district. We have the closing meeting, which you talk to us about different things, concerns you might have. How can we make things better for the next person that replaces you, and those kinds of things. Well, in that survey, we kept it was like 2 major questions, and they dealt with mainly check the area that why you withdrew your name from the list, what would it probably attributed to? And so of those, 42% said COVID, disease spread, and stuff was the main concern for them, was COVID, the reality of COVID, and their concern. 41% said they wanted additional pay. Now, there were other reasons that they could check, such as we took another job, we relocated maybe out of our district, and so it's not convenient. We now have other issues, personal issues that keep us from doing it at this time. It doesn't mean we won't come back. So we're trying to get an idea how much of it could be maybe just pay related. So we got half of the 27% which is 13%. So I don't know if I'd hang my hat on it, but it's obviously something we felt like would be an issue if asked. And so sure enough, it is an issue. And we would, but we have the salary study. We're underway on that now, and it's going to take a while. I don't even know if it's going to be anywhere completed by the time we do the budget, which we need to know how to build that in. We want to truthfully see what groups of our employees are not where they need to be. Everybody's probably going to fit that category, but who's the furthest away? And then is there any particular group that might be close to being okay, and that's not where we need to start, and we can maybe start as funding is available to pull these groups on board. That's everybody, all the support staff, the teachers, everybody, maintenance, custodial, the whole 9 yards. So with that in mind, it's going to take a while, but I'm very concerned about morale. There's nothing I can do about it. As long as we have the pandemic, my morale is about as low as it's going to get. I'm very concerned, and we knew our nurses had been under the gun since day one. But I'm seeing now, my greatest concern is really shifting now to our administrators. They're the people who help to calm the fears of their teachers and their staff, and they have lots of issues they're trying to grapple with and deal with. And remember, we have a shortage of administrators also. So it's a shortage in every field. So I couldn't single out one group or the other, and I feel like, what do you do? I would like for the board to consider letting the finance budget committee maybe address this with people from my staff, myself, that we can sit and talk to you about some of our ideas. One being, but I would like it done pretty soon, I vision us doing something right now with the COVID monies that we have. I would say, just as an example, I'm not setting a thing, but if we say could do $1,000, that'd be for every single employee, no matter what your title was, to ensure the fairness. We wouldn't be weighing it out, and that's the fair. If we could do 1,200, that's even better. 1,500 is even better. I don't want to get much lower than that, because when taxes are taken out, you don't get anything. But we've got to show our people that we're not trying to pay them more. That's not what this is about. This is just a small thank you for going the extra mile. It's called an extra mile incentive. And we'll just pick a date that we think this could be done, and it's whoever's employed with us at that time in any capacity would be eligible. We wouldn't be able to do retroactive, of course, and those kind of things, but who's ever on the rolls. If they're FMLA, they're out on COVID, they're out on maternity leave, they count. They're employees of the district. And so I think it's as fair as it possibly can be. So I hope you'll entertain that. Some of you I've spoken to individually along the way. I know you and I spoke at our agenda meeting, and I feel there's great support there. If that's the right answer, I'm not sure. I would love the committee to weigh in and listen to the different options. We may actually come up with a plan better than what I'm coming up with, but it's not out of desperation. It's just really out of gratitude. I'm telling you, folks, we're going to lose a lot of people this spring, even if it goes away tomorrow. People are so tired. They're out there, and I don't know what I can do about it. I can't make it go away. I can't change the rules and the regulations. I wish I could depend on every parent and every person in the community to tell us if their child tested positive, or to have their child tested if they think they suspicion that. But we don't get that. So the children come back because they're sent back for child care reasons or whatever may be happening, which are real to those families. But then they're out there spreading it to other students. And so that's just a hard thing to explain to people, and about why are you calling my house again? You called about my third grader last week. Now it's my fourth grader. Please tell me my fifth grader is okay. So that's why we're looking at these numbers to say we can't say that, but we can maybe give them a glimpse of how we're trying to do this. And I'm trying to be fair. So if y'all are all right with that, Madam Chair, when you get to the committees, if you could help me out by helping activate that right away, because I'd like that to happen within the month. This is a hard time for people with income tax, and right after the Christmas break, and a lot of people have overspent, and A lot of people are still unemployed, and it's just they're having a hard time making ends meet, so I'd like to do it now.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Pye in the state of the district? Nope. Okay, we're going to move on then. The next thing on our agenda is the personnel report. Board members, in your packets, you should have received the recommendations and resignations for the 21-22 school year. I need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie, second. Seconded by Mr. Mitchum. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Okay, next on our agenda is our financial report. Mr. Billy Saunders.
Good evening. You should have a copy of the November finance report in your board packet. On the first page, we have the general fund balance sheet. Our total assets and total liabilities and fund balance equaled $32.5 million at the end of November 2021. The amounts for November 2020 were $42.2 million. The change in assets is primarily due to $3.5 million increase in cash and investments balance and a reduction in due from other funds by almost $13 million, which gives us the net decrease of $10 million. We operate on a centralized accounting system for all funds, where general fund has a separate due from other fund account for every other fund, and every other fund has an offsetting due to general fund account. Cash transactions, in effect disbursements made and revenue received, are recorded in the general fund, and the accounting system automatically records the balancing entries in the due from accounts. The balances in these accounts reflect timing differences between expenditures being made and claims filed for the expenditures. The amount shown in 2020 is primarily made up of the amount due from our equipment acquisition funds, where we paid for student devices first, then drew down the money from Bank of America. As we see in the next couple of months' activity, when we present our reports, that those due from amounts are reduced as we claimed those funds. The same methodology takes place when we spend money and are reimbursed or paid back, quote unquote, from the state for the various grants that we have been awarded. Another difference is seen in the liability side with the tax anticipation note of $18.3 million for the year 2020. We weren't certain if the pandemic was going to slow the timing of the payments we typically receive monthly from the state. To ensure we could pay our bills, and most importantly, our employees, we borrowed a short-term TAN, which is paid off in March 2021. The final section, which shows the fund balance difference of approximately $7 million, we did have a savings last year of revenues over expenditures that is reflected here. It is almost the exact amount of our unassigned fund balance increase. That unassigned fund balance remained as our savings and was not budgeted towards any additional increases in expenditures this current year. On the next page, we show our general fund revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. Our percentages of revenues and expenditures are right in line with last year. Although we had higher amounts in both categories, we had a higher budget this year, so those figures are right on track. We would like to give you an update that last week we did receive our first tax distribution from the county for the December property taxes collected. We are at 49% as of this month. That's not reflected in this, obviously, because that's November. Most of our tax collections come in December and January. The next page is the balance sheet for food service. Assets remain relatively unchanged from this time last year. The credit balance in the DD2 general fund increased by approximately $1.7 million to approximately $2.4 million. This is due to revenues received in excess of expenditures. Total fund balance has increased by approximately $1.7 million to $2.2 million. The next page is the schedule of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance for food service. Revenues have increased approximately $2.8 million to $3.9 million. Net change in fund balance has increased from $455,000 to $1.2 million. So we've really seen the food service fund, really performing stronger. It was really struggling at first with the pandemic due to lack of participation, but we see it's coming back around now, and we're hoping for the future that we can see get things back to normal and see this increase in participation rates continue. You also have the school activity fund balances report. This report is presented for informational purposes only. The revenue for these funds is collected at the school level for specific purposes and should only be used for the purpose for which they were collected. The school district has fiduciary oversight of these funds. The state legislature has begun their session for the year, but we have not yet received any projections. We will be monitoring and will provide updates as we receive information. And everyone's probably heard about the governor's proposal, but we don't really have any details. We've got some summary information on that. And it's just that the governor's proposal is just a proposal. What really counts is what the legislature does. And I don't have any additional information, but would be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I make a motion to accept the financial report as information only.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to accept the financial report. Does anybody have any discussion or questions? I have a question. We always ask a question very similar to this, and it's to do with, looks like the majority of it is at the high schools, and it's their general operating budget and their trust fund. I understand the trust fund is for things that they've already encumbered, like they've collected money for yearbooks and stuff like that. So I understand that portion of it. But in some situations, the general operating budget, their numbers are really high. Is there a lot of things still yet to? Can you explain to me why that's that way?
Specifically, which one are you looking at now?
It's the 3 high schools.
Okay, all right, 3 high schools. Well, I mean, the reason the balances are high is they haven't spent their money. And I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I guess that's the truth. And I think a lot of money may be collected in some activities that are restricted due to the pandemic, perhaps. And so you don't see the schools able to spend money as readily as they have in the past. And Tina and I have had that discussion. We've noticed that amount has increased. And so that would be my answer, just right off the cuff would be that the schools, aren't spending the money as readily as they normally do due to restrictions from the pandemic. That's what I would assume. But, we could research it if you, had any particular item you want us to research.
Well, the only concern that I have, which has been a concern that I think we all have had over the years as we look at this, and it's just that to make sure that any funds that are for that year is spent within that year for the students of that year. So if they've raised funds or whatever, we want to make sure that goes to benefit that year's students.
Well, you actually have your general fund has an unassigned fund balance, but then you also have an assigned fund portion is assigned, which includes that, which I think was close to $1 million was in the assigned part for the school carryover balances. And that's in the general fund as well as the pupil activity funds. So, the schools
We didn't
have
take it
money.
from the schools, though, did we? I mean, we pulled it out at the end of the year. We didn't let them keep it, but we have it for when those 3 high schools have a need for something. That's the fund we go to fund it, like new band instruments or band uniforms or whatever they can't raise. Instead of me keep coming to the budget and pulling out 40,000 for this school and 50 for this one, to keep it fair, where that money that you did not spend, it's sitting there, but it's going to be used for any and all things that do occur. But Mrs. Hughes was just saying she would like to have it happen the year that's occurring. I know we don't want to spend our money in these times rapidly. We got to be conservative, but it's getting towards the end of the year. We would like for them to be thinking about something if they need it to go ahead and get it. Make sure your teachers, because I did have some teachers, some stuff was sent to me from SCA that they had done like a survey or something, and there was a couple of teachers that mentioned they did not have paper in their school, and that's just, there's no excuse in that. We're not allowed that at all. I don't know the teacher, I don't know the school, probably don't want to know, and I'm finding that very difficult because I believe I would have heard it if it was a school-wide problem. But the paper is there. Maybe this teacher is one who abuses paper, and she does a worksheet a minute for her children in there, and we're not allowing that. That's not proper learning. Those days are over. So there's just no sense in the money I spend on technology to still consider, cutting down all those trees to operate the copy machine. So there's a balance there, but I need to know that, I guess, to make sure when I meet with the principals tomorrow, I'll put that on the agenda. We'll add that to the agenda about spending that money, making sure that nobody can come to us and say there's not a need. That's a practical need that we're expected to provide. I don't want any art teacher providing their own art paper. That's just, we're not doing that. We're tightly funded, but we are not that poor. And there's no excuse that we can't have that because we took a lot of stuff that we could to move to COVID to free up the budget so we could get the things that schools needed that we have not been able to do in the past. So I'm not saying it's open season, but I don't want them to do without.
Yes, sir, and there's 2 issues here. The student activity funds, as you were discussing there, they have funding there. That's kind of restricted. That's a fiduciary fund, so the schools need to spend it for what they collected that money for, so that's restricted. This other issue is the general fund that Mr. Pye is talking about. The schools, I think part of the issue with that is we've had additional funding come in, like ESSER money and other money, that so it's picked up some of the needs. So some of this, some of our supply money at the school level has built up. But yes, we need to utilize that. Mr. Pye is exactly right. We need to utilize those funds and go ahead and move forward and use those funds up, and then use our federal funding for pandemic issues and whatnot.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the financial report as information. Any other discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Okay, next on the agenda is our facilities and construction report. Mr. Souls.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Got a little bit to talk about tonight. We've had a movement on just about every project that we've got going on. The Ashley Ridge horticulture expansion, the greenhouse. The OSF inspector was back here looking at the bus loop one day, and he gave us a verbal approval to use that. So we've got that. We're just waiting for the documentation to get through from a third party to OSF to get the CO, but we're good to use that. And while he was here, he and I struck up a conversation about a few other projects. So I drug him out to Ashley Ridge to look at the greenhouse and give us an idea of what we were looking at, because the third party didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what was going to be expected of us as a district. So he gave it a preliminary look, gave us some ideas of what we needed to do. We're getting that done, and hopefully we'll be able to close that one out next month. The fire alarm replacement at Somerville High School. That's been going on for the past, I know it's over 2 years. I want to think 15 years, but I know Kenny thinks it's 15 years, but it's only been about 2.5 years now. But the system is online. It's protecting our students. We got the verbal use from the local AHJ and OSF. There are some programming issues with just some messages that come out of the speakers, but the system is safe, the school is safe, our students and staff are safe, and that's what we're going on. As soon as the contractor gets everything, all the bugs worked out of it, we'll have a clean bill of health on that and get a certificate of occupancy from OSF at that time. The new middle school is moving along at a rapid pace, moving along a lot faster than what we can hardly keep it up with it. But they've got roof decking on most of the school now. They were actually there's decking on the back wing now, and they're going to start putting roofing membrane on this month, and hopefully their hope is to have it the roof dried in by March 1st. And at the pace they're going, I believe they can probably pull that off fairly quickly. The aerial photographs you see there are compliments of our photography students over at Somerville High School. They've got the drone out and they're taking pictures for us. And they're doing a lot of site work. The water main has been connected. Don't have any pictures of the brick veneer, but the brick veneer is about 2/3 of the way around the building. So they've got the entire front done. They took a pause on the gym to get the steel set for the gym. The cafeteria and kitchen's pretty much bricked up. The spray applied foam is on most of the building now, and they're just moving right along. You really can't tell from the aerial photographs anymore because there's probably on any given day you can go into that building and there's probably 80 workers inside that school. Conduit is going up, so safety is an issue for a guy like me. I mean, I walk out there and there's so much stuff going on. I actually stand in the corner and just watch in amazement of how fast these guys are moving because I don't want to get hit with a stick of conduit or a piece of duct work, or it's moving along really, really fast. And we're still on track for an August 8th completion date. That weekly report, the full weekly report is in your board pack. We got started on some design documents for the gym renovation back here. We've got about 10 office spaces going in there with room for expansion as we might need it. The old art building, we talked about taking it down. Seems like just a few weeks ago, it's gone. So we've got a clean slate back here. We're going to start. I'm probably going to hold off on doing anything for the playground for Somerville Elementary until we get all the big pieces and parts moved into the gym. We've got some large mechanical equipment going back here, so we're going to kind of keep that corridor open right behind our building here, so to allow for construction for the old gym and the renovation back there. We've already checked into some playground equipment, some of which can be moved from the playground up on Main Street back here, but a couple pieces of new equipment might be appropriate for our new playground back here. Just a quick thing. We had some guys working over the weekend for our weather non-event, I would call it. Luckily, we dodged that bullet. We did have a few fire alarm messages from power outages scattered around. We had one broken water line over at one of the mobiles at Devon Road, but we had a handful of guys out yesterday, and we took care of everything to make sure that we were ready for business this morning. So with that said, are there any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Since we've moved the Somerville Elementary buses to the back,
Yes, ma'am.
is there any plans to put a canopy for those kids to walk under to get to those buses for bad weather?
Yes, ma'am. That's coming.
Okay.
That's forthcoming. That's Our budget was tight on the parking lot and bus loop, but we had our solicitation for the aluminum canopies. The current one runs out February the 16th. So we advertised for the new solicitation. We put that out last week on Skibo, and we opened that bid up on February 1st. So as soon as we have a new vehicle in place for procurement, we can move forward and get quotes for that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Souls? Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is unfinished business. And the first thing under unfinished business is something that I ask all of the board members to oblige me in at the last board meeting of appointment of the board secretary. That's the responsibility of the board chair. And I wanted an opportunity to hold off on that so that I could have some discussion. And that being said, I would like to ask Ms. Wimberly if she would please be our board secretary.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. It would be my pleasure.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we're going to move on under unfinished business to the naming of the new middle school. Does anyone have any comments about, we had a board workshop right before the board meeting and allowed a few individuals that came in that was interested to talk to us about some names that they thought would be fitting for our new middle school, and along with that to tell us why they thought those names would be fitting. And along with that, we asked that Ms. Passmore to let us know what the approved procedure was for the board to follow when they were naming new schools, as well as we took the opportunity to read the board policy on naming a facility. So if I could, Ms. Passmore, if you would just come up and just in recollection of the workshop, just read over what you read in the workshop for the process, the approved process.
Soliciting input from the community to name new schools is a long tradition in Dorchester School District 2. We have had extraordinary participation in this process, as over 1,700 name suggestions were submitted online for the new middle school. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, the media, and community groups for helping in this effort. It was amazing to learn of the many individuals, past and present, who have contributed to the education of our children. However, school names are not selected by the Board of Trustees based solely on the number of suggestions for a name. They are charged with taking many factors into considerations, such as the neighborhoods that will attend a particular school now and in the future, as well as the geographic location and the history connected to the various areas of our community. As a new middle school is completed and the neighborhoods are assigned to attend the district's newest school, those students, parents, and staff will be an integral part of establishing their school culture.
Thank you once again, Ms. Passmore. Okay, and one more time, I am going to read the policy for naming of schools, just for those who were not able to listen to our workshop. The board is responsible for naming of school facilities. Naming a school is a matter of great importance. It is a matter that deserves thoughtful attention from the board and the administration. Personal prejudice or favoritism, political pressure, or temporary popularity should not be an influence in choosing a school name. Generally, the board prefers to name school facilities for recognized geographical areas. Under certain circumstances, the board will consider requests from school and community groups to name a portion of a building, a single building, or a campus within multiple buildings, or a specific area on the campus for a person. The proposed name should have special significance and/or the person has made an outstanding contribution to the school or school system. The superintendent will prepare recommendations and the board will approve a procedure for the board to follow when naming the school properties or portions thereof. Naming facilities by gift. The board may approve naming opportunities in cases where a significant financial gift has been accepted for the district by the board in exchange for permanent or temporary naming of district facilities or portions thereof. The gift can be designated for new construction or for naming of an existing facility. Okay, with that being said, there was lots of discussion that went on at our workshop, and board members, if you would like to just comment on anything or any suggestions, Mr. Farnsworth, did you have something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Absolutely, yeah, really good discussion, I think, at our workshop. A lot of good folks and really just a lot of information from the community, as well as maybe I would ask Mr. Pye, because I know you had some information as well. You had provided some possible recommendations and maybe just some of your reasoning. I know you had spoken with a lot of your folks behind the scenes. Can you give us some of that information?
That's why I was late up here to start the meeting, because when I felt that I put out 4 names, and I told you I didn't want to feel like Solomon and choose, and I knew all the people, and everybody's so deserving. It's just an awesome thing to have that kind of responsibility. And it's not a popularity contest. It's what's a name that's going to stick for years to come that might have some identification for a school to continue our galaxy of names in the district for various reasons that sort of paints the whole picture of whatever. So I told you I felt the geographic would probably be the safest, fairest way. So at the intermission or the break time there between the meetings, I consulted with my executive staff members who are all out here, and the vote was unanimous from them. They feel it should be East Edisto Middle. That was their choice, and you asked me to do it, so I did it.
Yeah, thank you. And just going back, again, it's a very difficult position because we heard from a lot of really phenomenal folks, and to be able to name a school after somebody like that and their contributions. And the hard part, of course, is, how do you really honor somebody when everybody is very deserving, and so that gets very difficult. So I do like the idea of doing it as a region. And I know, and again, we talked about this earlier, it seems very minute and it seems like a silly sticking point, but to have the same campus name, so if you have Beach Hill Elementary School and then Beach Hill Middle School, I know that seems silly, and to the community that probably makes sense, but from a district perspective, there's actually a little bit of confusion that can occur with just some logistics and operations within the district. So again, going back the history, I know we've spoken with some folks at Oak Brook, and there is that little minute bit of confusion and that sort of stuff. So that said, I would absolutely follow along with Mr. Pye's recommendation and the district's recommendation and make a motion to name the new middle school East Edisto Middle School.
Okay, I have a motion to name the new middle school East Edisto Middle School. Do I have a second? Second by Ms. Crosby. Any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0. We have a new East Edisto Middle School.
Along that note, in the morning, we'll be announcing the new principal. In the morning, they were dovetailed together as we have to get input from, about where we're going with this school as we get. You see how quick it's coming on board. There was a lot of fear not to come out too quick when we may not be ready, but it appears that we're in good shape. And so after a lot of careful thought and consideration, we're ready to do that, and it will be announced at the principal's meeting first thing in the morning. 3 cheers out to all the district board members. You'll be getting 3 cheers, and the media. Everybody should know something pretty early in the morning. We have to contact anybody that I wanted to wait to make the announcement before we contact everybody that's applied for it, because that's our procedure here, and no one hears about this as a surprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pye. Okay, we're going to move on. Next on the agenda is our new business, and the first thing under new business is board committee assignments. We have several board committees, and I would like to begin with our legislative committee. And I would like to ask Ms. Tanya Robinson if she would chair that committee for me. Sure. Okay. Mr. Mitchum, would you be on that committee with Ms. Robinson? Thank y'all very much.
Did he say yes?
Sure.
He shook his head. Okay, also on the Budget and Finance Committee, Mr. Mitchum, you again. Would you please chair that committee for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Help me give away some money to the employees. Yes, I'll go for that.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, and Ms. Crosby, would you please sit on that committee with Mr. Mitchum? The Budget Finance Committee. Budget. Well, I've already got him assigned, Barbara. Okay, and also along those lines, Mr. Pye had asked for his committee to work on the tasks that he, for our, I don't remember what words you used, but for the bonus or the
for the hazardous pay
or
the
whatever
great
we're going to
thank you
call
for
it.
a job well done, going the extra mile.
I think that the only fitting committee to work on that would be the Budget Committee. So if Mr. Mitchum and Ms. Crosby, if you would help him work on that, I would appreciate it. And also, board members, that is a committee of the whole. So, of course, you're always welcome to sit on any of the committees, but especially the Budget Committee when preparing the budget. If you'd like to attend those, we feel welcome to do that. Okay, next on of my committees is the facilities committees. Ms. Crosby, I would ask if you would chair that committee for me. Okay, and Mr. Guthrie, would you please sit on that committee with Ms. Crosby? Thank you. Okay, we also have our SMEG committee and our DD2 Foundation board. And those two just actually got started towards the end of the year, and we have Ms. Robinson on that Southern Magnolia Group Committee. If you would please continue on that, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
And Ms. Wimberly on the DD2 Foundation board. Okay. Then we have our Policy Committee. Mr. Farnsworth, would you please chair that committee for me? Okay, and Ms. Wimberly, if you would sit on that committee with him. Also, I would like to bring our Safety Task Force back. We have, because of COVID, we've been out for a while, and there's lots of safety concerns, some of which are surrounding COVID, and we really need to start getting back into that as well. So I would like to bring that committee back. Of course, that committee has normally been chaired by the board chair, so I will chair that committee, and the vice chair has always sat on that committee as well. So Ms. Robinson, if you would please help me with that committee, I would appreciate that as well.
And everybody else can come.
And everybody else, as all committees, all board members are welcome to attend any of these committee meetings. And when notifications go out for these meetings, you will be notified. Every board member should be notified, but those two people are ultimately the responsible for being there and reporting those back to the board. So that was the reason why they were done that way. I can't hear you, Ms. Crosby.
Will the metal detectors be discussed at that safety?
I don't know until we get that committee back together, but once we get that committee back together, we will certainly bring back what the concerns and the discussions are back to the board at that point. So all safety is usually discussed during those meetings. So yeah, I'm sure that will, I think, as a matter of fact, I think that was a discussion a few years back in that committee. So, okay, so I think that's all the committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments on those assignments? Nope. Okay, thank y'all very much for helping me out with those. And so we're going to move on to the next item under new business, and that is our safety discussion. Mr. Pye, is that something that you would like to
Yeah, I guess
work on?
we have to start somewhere. I've asked our security personnel to be here tonight, and we'll ask Mr. Jide if he'll please address some of the things we've been talking about and what he feels about it.
Sure. Good evening. Glad to hear that the Safety Task Force is coming back. I don't know how you guys do it on the other committees, but we always have the best snacks. So that's been a welcome addition, in case you couldn't tell, since I've been back. I want to take a few minutes tonight to kind of discuss some of the things that we do in Dorchester School District 2 in terms of safety and security, some of the thoughts that we have moving forward, kind of the direction that we're going, and some of the options that we explore. So I've just made a few notes. The number one thing that we do in this district to address the safety and security of our children is the development of our threat assessment teams. Dorchester School District 2 was not just the first in the county or the state, the first in the country to institute a district-wide threat assessment program. At each school, we have a team that is made up of teachers, administrators, the school nurse, psychologist, and our law enforcement partners. Anytime that we receive a threat, if it's a kid that posts online that they want to commit suicide, or if there's a threat that they want to commit, they want to create some type of harm towards somebody else, we have a threat assessment team that evaluates that student and that threat. That student is involved in that, the parent is involved in that, and they evaluate to determine whether it's a transitive threat or a transient threat or a substantive threat, and how to deal with it. And if law enforcement needs to be involved in handling that, or if we need further psychiatric treatment for that child, we pursue those avenues. So the threat assessment teams and using our folks and training our folks is the number one thing that we do in this district to make sure that our students are safe. Every threat is taken serious, very seriously. Whether it's somebody wrote something on a bathroom wall, we find a note on a school bus, or somebody makes an overt threat, we investigate all of those. So once we do that, we notify parents, we notify the proper authorities, and if we need to handle through discipline or counseling, we do that, because the number one thing we want to do is make sure that that child receives the help that they need, so they no longer feel the need to make those types of threats. The second thing that we've done in this district that we've spent a tremendous amount of money on is converting all of the locks in all of our buildings to what we call a storefront function. And what that means is that when you stick your key into a door, you unlock the door and you open the door. Once you pull that key out, that door is locked and that door is shut. It's a very interesting note that in the history of school shootings throughout the United States, no child has ever been killed behind a locked classroom door. Where they ran into an issue, I had somebody that was trying to sell bulletproof doors. They called me out on the Parkland shooting and said that, well, actually, students were shot in the classrooms. That was because the teachers opened the doors. The teachers opened the door to try to let other students in. When they did that, the gunman went in and was able to shoot students in that particular situation. So in this district, we've switched over to that function. Once a teacher puts their key in the door, they pull it out, that door is locked. All of our teachers are taught to teach with their classroom doors shut, so that those doors are always locked. It also gives the ability for me and for our law enforcement partners to have one key that will open up every door in the district. So every door is keyed so that the teacher can have a key that just opens up their door. The principal can have a key that opens up the doors in their school. But myself, facilities, our law enforcement partners, they can have one key that opens up every single classroom door. So that if there's ever an event where they need to clear the building, they can do that. And they can do it quickly and efficiently without having to scare the kids by busting down the doors. That was one of the problems. I was actually involved when I was in the FBI in the first response to a school shooting in Ocala, Florida. And one of the major problems we had was gaining access to those doors because the teachers did a great job and the students did a great job of shutting and locking those doors, but then we couldn't get in. So we want to make sure that we can gain access, but nobody else can. So that's kind of the second thing. The third thing that we have done is upgrade all of our camera systems. We're in the process. We've done a little over half of our schools now. Several $1 million project to do it. It's been a bit of a process to get it done. The company that we're working with is absolutely incredible. And this camera system is above and beyond anything I had in the FBI. I mean, facial recognition, the tracking that they have, the availability to identify students or trespassers when they come in. I mean, even down to if somebody pulls out a cell phone and you've identified that as something that they're not supposed to have in the hallway, if a student pulls out a cell phone, it'll highlight it and send an alert to the administrators. So they're working on their weapons detection to do the same thing. They feel like they've got it under control, and that's going to be available soon. The only thing is they want to make sure that it's absolutely 100%, because once you say that your system can do that, they want to make sure that it never fails. So they are working on that. The next thing is the DD2 task force. I actually was glad to see that you guys were talking about that. That was on my list of things to talk about. That is something, again, when I talk about being leaders, world-class, being the best, that's another area that Dorchester 2 was way out in front of everybody else. The threat assessment program is number one. The safety and security task force is probably number two. I get calls routinely from other safety directors and security directors around the state wanting to know what we did, how it was formed, and what the goal of it was. So for those of you that don't know, just before I arrived back in Dorchester 2, the district had formed a safety and security task force committee that they just discussed. It was originally created, and they created a 5-year plan. And it's a committee that's made up not just of board members and myself. We have law enforcement partners, we have parents, we have school psychologists, we have students. Students don't often get to be involved in making decisions for the schools or with the schools. So we actually had 3 students, and it was actually 3 young ladies. And I'm gonna tell you what, they brought something to every single meeting that added value that we were able not just to hear, but to actually act on. So I hope that you guys plan to include students on that task force again, because I thought that we got to give our kids a lot of credit. I don't think we do that sometimes, and they were pretty sharp. But we identified 6 needs in the creation of a 5-year plan to address those needs, and I submitted that to Mr. Pye and district leadership sometime last year. I don't remember the exact date. The needs that they identified were the storefront function locks. I'm glad to say, check that off. That's been completed. The second thing was installing distributed antenna systems or bidirectional antennas in our schools. That's something that we don't have in all of our schools. It is a requirement for new schools that are being built. So we do have it on some, but it allows law enforcement to communicate more effectively with other law enforcement and medical that are outside. So some of the issues we run into at some of our schools, if we have our SROs inside the building, the signal is not strong enough for them to talk on their police radios to other police or to fire and rescue or to EMS. So if those folks are responding, they may not get enough information quickly to get to the right spot as fast as they can. So adding those would be a huge help. Again, though, that is probably the most expensive endeavor on the list. We've talked about active shooter. The third thing was active shooter training for bus drivers. You can check that off. We've done that. That's something that we include our bus drivers in now. That was one of those things that was overlooked in the past. But what do they do if there's something in a school or there's something on their bus? We have added that. Active shooter training for custodial staff. And that was another valuable asset that we had on the safety task force, is we actually had several of our lead custodians on that task force. For those of y'all that know anything about how schools operate, or really about how buildings operate, custodians know everything. They're in the buildings, they're in the classrooms, they're talking to everybody. They know everything that's going on. So hearing their perspective on what they see and things that we need, they were a big reason why we got the storefront locks. They had the same concerns. So getting them active shooter trained, we did that as well, not just of our teachers. The fifth thing that we identified was a smart 911 or mass communication application. A smart 911 application, there are several different methods for these. They can be on your phone. It's just an app on your phone that works off of your school Wi-Fi. So if there's an incident in a classroom, a teacher can hit the button and it automatically alerts the police, not just that there's an incident at the school, but what classroom they're in. They can click a second button to say it's a medical emergency, it's an active shooter emergency, it's a fire emergency. And it alerts the police, it alerts 911, and it alerts every other person in that school that has that app. So they can say if there's a shooter in room 211, they click that button, everybody knows we're going on lockdown right away and why. The other really neat feature of some of these applications, in particular Smart 911, a teacher or a parent, if they have a student that has a peanut allergy, they can go into the system themselves, say Justin Farnsworth has a peanut allergy, and then it's in the system. So when little Justin falls out in class, and I'm the teacher, and I say, well, we have a medical emergency, it's Justin Farnsworth, it automatically pops up on the app, well, he has a peanut allergy. It may be that, it may not, but it at least gives everybody a place to start in what may be going on. If it's seizures, we know that kid has seizures or epilepsy or whatever the case may be, and it gives everybody in the building that needs to know, and you program it for who needs to know what. If it's a lockdown, obviously that's going to everybody. If it's a medical emergency, that's going to go to the school nurse, probably your admin team, and maybe your SRO and that kind of thing. So you can actually set up those alerts to go to the folks that you want them to go to. So it's pretty neat. All right, and then the final thing was securing our building exterior windows, doors, and vestibules. More or less what we wanted to do was create kind of a man-trap area when you enter a school. So when you get buzzed in through the front door, you can approach the front desk, but you do not have access to the rest of the school yet. All right, you have to be buzzed through a second set of doors. We've done a pretty good job. We've got a couple of schools that I think we can shore up just a little bit. But I know Mr. Souls and his guys came through and put big panes of plexiglass, and they actually made it look pretty good. If you ever go over to Somerville High School and you see what they did up in the front with that big, gigantic space that they had, they were able to enclose that so that when somebody comes through the front door, they can talk to the person at the front desk, but they can't go around to any other doors, and they can't jump over the desk or anything like that. So I'm happy to report that a lot of these are things that we've already done. We did discuss in those meetings metal detectors. I talked to the news the other day. As the director of security, I think I would be remiss if I ever shot down a security measure without fully investigating and looking into it. I talked with Charleston and Berkeley County, their directors, all the time. We are very early in the process of looking at what that exactly entails. We know that there are a lot of challenges, and it's my job to identify those challenges and then figure out if we can efficiently, effectively address those challenges and pull it off. So I've been in discussions with several companies that provide metal detectors, talking to them about how they work, how they operate, what kind of cost are we looking at. Of course, nobody wants to give you the cost until they come in and evaluate your school. But there are some hidden costs associated with it. When you have the metal detectors, it takes at least 3 people to operate those per metal detector. So I'm fortunate enough to have on my staff the former TSA agent that worked in Charleston, Florence, and Hilton Head airports. He pretty much ran the show over there. We were able to steal him away. Great guy. So he was kind of running me through that process as well. So if you have a small school, if you've got 700 or 800 kids in a school, there's one way in, one way out. Running a metal detector or 2 is not so bad, because once they come in, they're in their building. Those 6 people that would be operating those 2 machines, they operate them. Once everybody's in, they can pretty much stop, and they can go do something else or work on other security measures. When you look at some of our schools that are much bigger, and I know we have a neighboring county that is putting metal detectors in their schools, we have some logistical challenges that we face. Some of our schools, in particular Somerville High School, is 5 separate buildings. All right, so you may enter in the morning from the bus loop side, you might enter from the car rider side, which is in the front, you might enter from the parking side, which is all the way on the other side. So you might enter the main building. You would have to be metal detected when you go in that building. All right. To get to your other class, you might have to go back outside through the parking lot and to another building. So then you're going to have to be metal detected again when you go through the parking lot, pass your car, and go into that building. So now you've got at least 9 individuals working 3 metal detection stations in the main building. You have 1 at each of the other 4 buildings, or other 3 buildings, excuse me. So you would have 3 individuals working those stations as well. So the cost really adds up. The other thing that we really have to think about and talk about is if you've flown lately and you get to the airport and you're in that security line and there's 50 people there in front of you. You got 50 people standing in that line and they're operating 4 stations. And they've got somebody operating the little change thing where you put all your stuff. They've got somebody wanding you down. They've got somebody directing you through. You have those people, and they're all trained, highly trained individuals to do that, but you still get aggravated because it took you 25 minutes to get through security. Now imagine trying to get 3,600 people in the span of about 25 minutes, all right? It's a huge undertaking. So I completely understand why the layperson would say, well, just put metal detectors in, they walk through the metal detectors, it goes off, you stop them, if it doesn't, then they go on through. It's just not that simple. It's just not that simple, because if it does beep, now you have to figure out where that's coming from. And if it's a zipper or a belt or something on their shoes or jewelry that they're wearing or whatever the case may be, now you have to figure out where that's coming from. So you have to have people to do that. You've just stopped the line of people coming through, even if you move them off to the side. So, you know, and then in a school setting as well, if it beeps, how far are we willing to take that search? If we, you know, the person walks through the metal detector and it beeps, and then we pull them off to the side and have them empty their pockets and take off their shoes, and we wand them and there's still a beep, at what point does that search stop? If you're working at the airport, they take you to TSA, they take you to the closed door room, put on their gloves, and give you the treatment. Obviously, we're not going to be doing that at any of our schools. You know, I don't think that we're going to be willing to do that. So I want to be very clear. I am 100% in favor of putting metal detectors in schools if we can do it in an efficient manner and it's feasible for us in Dorchester too. Not every school is the same, and I've had phone calls from parents to discuss this, and they said, well, you know, at my old school, we did this. Well, all right, well, give me some information about your old school. It was an inner city school. They had 700 students. They all came in. Once they were in, they were in. At the end of the day, they left. That's probably pretty doable. Our schools are much bigger, much more open, so there are some challenges. So I am definitely, absolutely not willing to say that we're not going to do it or can't do it or shouldn't do it. I just think that it's going to be a process that we need to discuss, and I think our safety task force will be a huge part of that discussion because I think we need multiple viewpoints from lots of different people to kind of see what we can do to make that happen. And if we decide we can, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to do it? And if we decide we can't, what are some other options that we have that may get us close to what we were trying to do? With that, I just want to let anybody know, you know, I get phone calls and emails, and, you know, I've brought parents in the last couple of weeks, and we've sat in my office and talked about different things and different ideas that they have, and some of them, you know, they're absolutely spot on. Even though, you know, I do consider myself an expert in the field, I don't know everything and don't pretend to know everything. So when we get suggestions, I love to hear them. It definitely could be something I haven't thought about. The Smart 911 system was something that I had not thought about, that somebody in the task force brought to us and said they had seen somewhere. So, hey, should we try it? And absolutely, yeah, if we can do it, and it's not a huge cost. I want to say it ended up being around $10,000 a school or something like that to get it done. So it's not an insurmountable cost to do. It's definitely something we can look at. So that was an idea that came to me from somebody outside of our immediate leadership team. So with that, if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Mr. Farnsworth?
And I apologize, not necessarily a question, but I just want to certainly commend Mr. Jayed. And I don't think folks understand. One thing you really didn't talk about, so you and your team, as well as your school resource officer team, the administrators, the teachers, the custodial staff, the one piece you didn't really talk about is the relationships.
Yes.
And that is the front line. I think as far as our district goes, We are phenomenal at building the relationships with our students and staff and understanding something's not quite right. We need to look into it and figure that out. So I just want to commend you guys on that. And then, I think it's interesting because you get into that balancing act, kind of like what you were talking about, because you've got to have a safe place for kids to learn. If it's not safe, they're not going to learn. But then on the other side, you certainly don't want to create a police state, right? Because if you go that route, they're not going to learn either. So it's a very interesting balancing act. And I know you've looked at it, there's some interesting technology with the detection stuff, so the artificial intelligence now, and I know you're talking big money, but that could be some avenues as that becomes more prolific and the costs come down. And the last piece I want to say, and I really, not to pat our own backs, but really Mr. Pye and the district, I want to commend the district, because every time I know in the past, especially so from the facilities group, when we've gone out, when we've looked at budget items, the number one thing that we always ask, is it a safety or security item? Number one, every single time. And I'm happy to report that the vast majority of those items that have come before the district, we've been able to figure it out. We've been able to provide for it. And so again, I just want to commend the district as a whole, because I do think folks may not realize it necessarily, because, and the honest answer is, from a security perspective, you really don't want folks to know all of your security protocols.
That's exactly right.
So on the outside looking in, they may not understand all of the security posture that we've got in place, but we are light years. I wholeheartedly feel that we are light years ahead than a lot of districts in the state and the nation. So I'm just very grateful for you and your team. So thank you.
Yeah, and going along with that, I do equate it to, it's a Disney World type of mentality. You go to Disney World and you ride the rides and you have a great day. You have no idea what kind of security they really have at those parks. I've seen that firsthand, and it's pretty amazing. You have no idea who's standing next to you in line and those types of things. We have a tremendous security footprint in this district. It would not be good operational security to put everything that we do out in the public and know what we don't have and who's doing what. But I will say, and this is a real credit to you guys and to Mr. Pye, when I got here, when I got back here in this role, there were basically two. It was basically myself and an assistant, Mike Miller. We have grown that department now to 11 that allow us to fill in where, if we have an SRO that's out for the day, we can send one of our guys there or ladies there. Or if we have an area that we think might be a particularly trouble spot, a football game or something where we're hearing ramblings that, there could be something going on, we can send extra folks there. The relationships that my folks have developed with the students in the schools is incredible. I know recently we've seen a little bit of an uptick in the news regarding things that we find in our schools. Guys, I'm going to tell you, those things were there. And we found them because of the relationships that my folks have developed with those kids in the school. And they've been tipped off as to, hey, this is there, and this kid's got this, and this kid's got that. So just because we didn't see them doesn't mean they weren't there. We're finding them now. And we're finding them because of the relationships that the folks in my department have built with the kids and the teachers in the schools. So I'm thrilled to death with the work that they've done. And I'm not a very touchy-feely guy. I don't give them a whole lot of pats on the back. But they really do deserve probably more than what I give them. I try to tell them every now and then they do a good job, but he'll tell you. The boss back there will tell you. But they really do an outstanding job.
Well, I want to just say I'm glad that you made this presentation, because when you hear parents or folks or whoever that are critical, they don't understand. They don't have any idea what goes on. And being on that task force committee, I know what goes on. And one thing you didn't brag about is you trained everybody on Stop the Bleed. And I thought that was amazing too. So
That was a team effort, but I'll give our nursing staff all the credit on that. That was something I think the task force wanted to do, and they executed it. I just helped. I was
great.
A helper on that one. So.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Crosby?
A lot of good information. It was just amazing. So I appreciate all that you did and the research you did.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is a committee reports, and we're going to begin with Ms. Robinson at the with a report from South Magnolia Event Group.
Okay. I know we've had a lot of information tonight, so I'll make this really quick, but it is important. This Southern Magnolia Group is a nonprofit 501c3, and a board member is on it because their whole purpose is to renovate, improve some of the most valuable property we have in the town of Somerville, and they have jumped on it and done great. And in the meeting, I just wanted to report very quickly some of the kudos. The stadium was just used at an all-star game for top juniors in our state, which featured over 70 athletes, and over 1,200 people came to our community on that particular stadium. The stadium is going to be used for the Combine for South Carolina Coaches Association to host in April football players from all around the area. We have secured a large sponsor, and I'm sure that the SMEG would not care. It's Taco Boy, that's one, and they're also working with the Education Foundation. I know Ms. Wimberly is aware of that. But they have secured this large sponsor to pay for the rest of the scoreboard, and the statue of Coach will be delivered in April. The Rotary Club clock was delivered and installed, and they will be holding a ribbon cutting. And the work on the new McKissick, the little building out here, the McKissick Museum, and also the Alumni Center, they have already gutted it and done all kinds of work. You see the historic value in that building. The wood is beautiful on the floor, and they're just hard at work. And right now they have over $12,000 in their account, and so just kudos to them for helping us renovate and refurbish things at no cost to the district.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Ms. Robinson? Nope. Thank you very much, and thank you to SMEG for everything they're doing for our district. Okay, next on the agenda is public comments, and I have one public comment, and that is Ms. Kelly Bates. Okay, she's gone, okay? All right, next up is other business and correspondence, and that would be our teacher forum update from Ms. Samantha Hoffman.
Madam Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Pye. It is my pleasure to speak on behalf of the teacher forum this evening, and I am pleased to provide you with the following update. The Teacher Forum organized a community book drive in December to support and give back to our district elementary schools. I am happy to report that the book drive was a great success. Approximately 300 brand new books were donated, which ended up being enough books to make a difference in 3 of our district elementary schools at the K-1, 2-3, and 4-5 grade level range. The forum randomly selected the 3 elementary school recipients, and it was determined by the forum that it would be up to each school's administrative team to determine how the books were distributed to the students. The schools that will be receiving books from the drive to gift to students are Windsor Hill Elementary, Oak Brook Elementary, and Flowertown Elementary. Again, on behalf of the Teacher Forum, I would like to thank all who contributed and helped to make the book drive a success. The next initiative that we are planning is a legislative roundtable event. We are working with the SCEA and the PSTA to organize this community event to give all stakeholders a chance to meet and hear from local and state legislators regarding important issues in education. The event is scheduled to take place on February 17th at 6:30 p.m. here at the district office. We are excited to bring together the voices of all stakeholders and advocate in a positive and productive manner for our profession. Finally, January is School Board Appreciation Month. The Teacher Forum would like to thank you for your time, your dedication, and your servant leadership to our local schools and community now more than ever as we continue to navigate through the pandemic. We have a small gift for each one of you, which I've already given you, as a token of our appreciation for all that you do for our schools. A special thank you to Nothing Bundt Cakes of Somerville, as well as Coastal Coffee Roasters for helping us in appreciating you tonight. We hope that you enjoy. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much. Okay, does anyone have anything for the betterment of the district? If not, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mr. Guthrie. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Farnsworth. Any discussion? All in favor? 7-0. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and enjoy the rest of your evening.